In the year 130 before Christ, a Chinese emissary named Zhang Qian returned home after 13 years of captivity and travel. He had set out on a diplomatic mission. He came back with something far more valuable, the knowledge that beyond impossible deserts and mountains, entire civilizations existed and were willing to trade. That journey opened a route that would connect Rome to China. More than 6,000 kilometers of roads, caravans, inns, and markets that would move silk, spices, precious metals, ideas, and religions for over 1,500 years. We call it the Silk Road. But it was not really one road. It was a network. And it was not the first. Thousands of years before Zhang Qian, human beings were already trading across extraordinary distances. Today we are going to travel those routes. Because international trade is not a modern invention. It is as old as civilization itself. Welcome to Season 10 of Everything Has a Price. So far we have covered the origins of money, markets, banking, economic crises, and the history of capitalism. Now we enter a topic that connects everything that came before, trade between nations. Over the next 8 episodes we are going to trace the history of global trade, from desert caravans to the supply chains of the 21st century. From silk and spices to microchips and tariff wars. We start at the beginning. With the routes that connected the world long before planes, shipping containers, or the internet existed. If any people deserve the title of first commercial empire, it is the Phoenicians. From their coastal cities in what is now Lebanon, Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, these navigators dominated the Mediterranean for centuries, from approximately 1500 before Christ. The Phoenicians did not have a great army. They did not conquer vast territories. Their power was trade. They built wide-bottomed ships with a single sail, capable of carrying large cargoes across the Mediterranean. They founded trading colonies from Carthage, in North Africa, to Cadiz, on Spain's Atlantic coast. There is evidence they reached the Canary Islands and possibly the shores of Great Britain. What did they trade? Cedar from Lebanon, highly prized for shipbuilding. Purple dye, extracted from a sea snail, so expensive it became a symbol of royalty. Glass. Ivory. And something that changed history, the alphabet. The Phoenicians spread it across the Mediterranean through their trading networks. But the most relevant thing for our story is their model. The Phoenicians demonstrated that a civilization could thrive not through military conquest but through commercial exchange. Wealth came not from the land but from the route. When we think of ancient trade, we think of the Silk Road. And with good reason. It was the most important trading network in pre-industrial history. The name is misleading. It was not a single road but a web of paths stretching more than 6,400 kilometers over land, from the ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an, today's Xi'an, to the ports of the eastern Mediterranean. And silk, though Chinese silk was its star product for centuries, was far from the only thing traded. The network consolidated from the 2nd century before Christ, when China's Han Dynasty formally opened trade westward. Along the route, goods passed from hand to hand. A bale of silk might change owners 10 times before reaching Rome. Each intermediary added their margin. That is why silk in Rome was worth literally its weight in gold. But the Silk Road moved far more than fabric. From east to west traveled silk, porcelain, jade, paper, gunpowder, and spices. From west to east traveled gold, silver, glass, wool, and horses. And alongside the goods traveled something impossible to put a price on, ideas. Buddhism reached China via the Silk Road. Islam spread along it. Agricultural techniques, medical knowledge, astronomy. Everything moved along those paths. The oasis cities along the route, like Samarkand, Bokhara, and Kashgar, became cosmopolitan centers where dozens of languages and cultures coexisted. They were not simple caravan stops. They were the nodes of a global exchange network. The route depended on a fragile balance. The empires that controlled it charged tolls and guaranteed safety. When those empires fell, trade was disrupted. When new powers arose, like the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, the route flourished again. Under the Mongols, a merchant could travel from Beijing to the Mediterranean in relative safety. Marco Polo did it, or so he claimed. While caravans crossed the deserts of Central Asia, another equally ancient and perhaps more important trading network stretched across the Indian Ocean. The key to this route was the monsoon. Arab and Indian sailors discovered that the winds of the Indian Ocean changed direction with the seasons. From April to September they blew from the southwest. From October to March, from the northeast. That meant you could sail to India in summer and return in winter. The monsoon was the engine of the entire system. Spices were the great treasure. Black pepper from India's Malabar coast. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka. Cloves and nutmeg from the Molucca Islands, in present-day Indonesia. These spices were not a frivolous luxury. Before refrigeration, they were essential for preserving food and making spoiled meat edible. Pepper was so valuable that in medieval Europe it was used as currency. Rents could be paid in peppercorns. The English expression peppercorn rent, meaning a nominal rent, comes from this. The Indian Ocean network connected East Africa with Arabia, India with Southeast Asia, and China with all of them. The ports of Aden, Calicut, Malacca, and Canton were the great nodes. Arab merchants acted as intermediaries between East and West, controlling the flow of spices to Europe and setting astronomical prices. The Phoenicians had kept a similar secret centuries earlier. They told fantastical stories about the origins of cinnamon, speaking of birds that built nests from cinnamon branches on inaccessible cliffs, all to discourage potential competitors from searching for the real source. Control of information was as valuable as control of the merchandise. There is something all these routes have in common that goes beyond merchandise. Trade was never just trade. Every caravan that crossed a desert, every ship that sailed an ocean, carried something more than material goods. It carried languages, religions, techniques, diseases, and ways of seeing the world. The Black Death of the 14th century reached Europe through trade routes. Paper and gunpowder, invented in China, reached the West through merchants. The numeral system we use today, the so-called Arabic numerals, traveled from India to Europe along the same routes as the spices. Trade created interdependence between civilizations that would never have known each other otherwise. Rome depended on Chinese silk without most Romans even knowing where China was. The Chinese consumed Roman glass without ever having seen Rome. This interdependence had profound consequences. It made civilizations richer, more innovative, more sophisticated. But it also made them vulnerable. When a route was cut, entire economies could falter. When an empire fell, the effects were felt thousands of kilometers away. Sound familiar? Ancient trade routes were not economic abstractions. They were the work of real people. The camel driver who spent months crossing the Taklamakan Desert, where sandstorms could bury an entire caravan. The sailor who ventured into the Indian Ocean with nothing but the stars and knowledge of the monsoon. The artisan who wove silk in Hangzhou without knowing that his fabric would end up clothing a Roman senator. These people were the links in chains that connected the world. And as in every trade chain, the profits were not shared equally. The intermediaries, those who controlled the strategic points of the route, were the ones who grew richest. The producers and final consumers received a fraction of the value. That structure, intermediaries capturing the margin while producers and consumers get the smallest share, has repeated itself in every era of global trade. From desert caravans to the digital platforms of the 21st century. 3 ideas to take away from this episode. First, long-distance trade is millennia old. The Phoenicians dominated the Mediterranean 3,500 years ago. The Silk Road connected China with Rome for over 1,500 years. Indian Ocean routes moved spices long before Europe knew they existed. Second, trade was never just merchandise. Trade routes transmitted ideas, religions, technologies, and diseases. Cultural exchange was as important as material exchange. Third, the basic structures of global trade were established in antiquity. Intermediaries, strategic routes, control of information, unequal distribution of profits. All of that already existed thousands of years ago. For thousands of years, trade moved at the speed of a camel or a sailing ship. Routes were long, the risk was enormous, and intermediaries took most of the profit. Then, in the 15th century, a new type of ship changed everything. And trade became conquest. That, next time.